China has just been hit incredibly hard by the Omicron variant of COVID.
我前几次翻出的原因是因为，包括这一次原因是因为我家里没有什么吃的了，我要去超市买一些东西吃。
你今天翻越了我们小区隔离护区，就是在抗拒疫情。国家不会同意，政府不会同意，我们工作者更不会同意。
What you're seeing here are people escaping a convention center. Now, this convention center is massive. I've been there myself. This is where they hold the Canton Fair. What happened is there was a convention going on and somebody turned up with a red health code on their phone. Now, how it works is, in China, everybody has an app that tracks their health. In other words, if you've been into a shopping mall or an area that somebody else had been into who later tested positive with COVID, your phone will then update to a yellow code and you have to go get tested. And only when you're cleared with a negative test does it go back to green after a certain number of days. Now, what happened is somebody walked in and they had a red health code. So what they did was shut down the entire facility and lock everyone in there. Tens of thousands of people, by the way, not a small amount of people, as you can see by these crowds. 49,000 people, according to media reports. Locked them in there in order to test every single one of them. Now, these lockdowns can last for days because, of course, there's an incubation period when it comes to catching the virus. So they can last for days, they can last for weeks. Nobody knows. And that's why when people heard they were being locked in, some of them scaled 2-meter-high fences in order to escape. These lockdowns are getting crazy. But this was a precursor to what's happening now. Entire cities and even provinces have now been locked down. It's no secret that the Chinese vaccine is completely useless against Omicron. In fact, the efficacy of the Chinese vaccine has always been very low. And anywhere that it's tested outside of China anyway, it's proven that it's not a very good vaccine. Of course, no vaccine is perfect. No vaccine is going to completely save you from Omicron. It's a very contagious and very infectious variant of COVID. But especially the Chinese vaccine is just completely useless against it. The Chinese government has this zero COVID policy. In other words, they don't accept even a single infection. If someone tests positive, they are forced into quarantine. Not only them, but anyone who may have come into contact with them, and of course an entire area, an entire housing complex, an entire neighborhood, an entire city, and now entire provinces are also being locked down whenever cases are found. There have been a massive spike in infections. In fact, the biggest spike of infections since 2020. Now, China notoriously does not release proper numbers. They hide the numbers, they play them down on purpose because they want to prove to the world that they have somehow overcome and beaten COVID and they're better than the world when it comes to how they dealt with the pandemic. The thing is, they're now admitting that there are some numbers. And one can quite safely take the official numbers coming out of China and multiply them tenfold at least. Because that's how it works. Anyway, that's all besides the point, because it's actions that speak louder than words here. 2 days ago, 5,154 new local cases were detected. And for some reason, they take symptomatic and asymptomatic infections and they count them separately. And I believe that this is just a way for them to bring the numbers down as well. So they can say, oh, we only had 3,000 symptomatic cases. And we don't really want to count the asymptomatic ones. But obviously, that's just a silly trick because if you've got COVID, you got COVID. And with the zero COVID policy, whether you're asymptomatic or not, it still goes against the zero COVID policy. Right now, we all face the threat of Russian state-sponsored hackers. We're currently going through some very uncertain times at the moment. One thing you can be certain of is that your internet connection is vulnerable. Unless you're using a VPN to guard yourself, it's possible that your data could be compromised, especially if you're the kind of person who's on the road and sets up in coffee shops, restaurants, hotels, places like that. It's very, very easy for people to gain access to your data and compromise anything you do on the internet. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN, and there's a good reason for this. I actually use it. Having a VPN is that added level of security that can give you some peace of mind. Take control of your internet experience today with NordVPN. So NordVPN's been around for 10 years now and they're celebrating their 10th anniversary. So new users will get a surprise gift when they sign up at nordvpn.com/SerpentZA. It's totally risk-free with a 30-day money-back guarantee. So give it a shot, why not? Other than peace of mind and security, a VPN is also useful if you want to watch a show that's no longer available in your country. Just change your region and bam, you can watch it. That's nordvpn.com/SerpentZA. Or just click the link in the description below. Anyway, back to the show. So anyway, as of 2 days ago, 5,154 new local cases were detected. 4,067 of those were detected in Jilin province. And so the whole province of Jilin went into lockdown. It's a huge province. I've been through it. In fact, during conquering northern China, we went all the way through Jilin. That's on the border of North Korea. This is a massive place, and they've locked the entire place down. Currently, millions of people are in lockdown across China. Langfang City, which is actually quite close to Beijing in Hebei province, has been completely locked down. And there are about between 5 and 6 million people in that city. Dongguan, of course, near to Shenzhen, where I used to live, is in complete lockdown. There are about 11 million people in that city. And of course, Shenzhen, where I lived for 14 years, is now in complete lockdown. There are an estimated 17 million people in Shenzhen. Of course, that fluctuates because it's a migrant city. But the fact of the matter is that I have so many friends and so many people on the ground that I know in Shenzhen, having lived there for 14 years, that I'm getting proper first-hand accounts of what's going on. Now, the government sent out official notices to everybody. All underground metro stations have been put on hold. All buses have been stopped. All residential districts now, like your housing complex, have strict entry and exit controls. You need to get a permit to go out and buy food, and it's only valid for a short amount of time. Everybody has to get forcefully tested for COVID 3 days in a row. Who knows how long it's going to extend for. But, these are very invasive tests, and you may not refuse to get a test. You must get tested. People are locked in their houses now. Some people have got locked in their offices. Some people have got locked in wherever they were at the time. It's a difficult situation, and it's complete lockdown. And it's something that we've been talking about for a while. This has been happening all over China to varying degrees. Usually, the big cities have been spared these big lockdowns, and you hear about it in the more rural areas or the smaller second, third tier cities. But now it's hitting the big one. Shanghai is partially locked down. International flights have been diverted from landing in Shanghai. It's pretty bad when they start locking down the big cities like Shanghai and Shenzhen, and even Dongguan, considering it's such a manufacturing hub. This is going to hit supply chains really hard, but that's not the important focus here. The important focus here is the absurdity of this zero COVID policy. We've seen many people champion China's take on containing COVID. Of course, the Chinese government uses it as a badge of honor, a soft power win. Look how we managed to get COVID under control in such a short period of time. Look at all the millions of Americans that have died of COVID because they don't know how to handle it. Look at all the millions of people around the world who got COVID because they're just dumb and we know how to do it and they don't. Of course, all the shills and CCP sycophants have been on board with this whole idea of that, oh, China took care of COVID. Look how quickly they erased it. Look how quickly they brought it under control. That's simply because we've been fed false numbers from the beginning. Of course, it looks great if your COVID infection rate suddenly goes to zero and never increases for years. It's nonsense. We know that the cases have been happening in China because the lockdowns have constantly been happening. You don't lock down an area if there are zero cases or zero deaths or zero anything with regards to COVID. It's a big thing. Look at what's happening in Hong Kong right now, where you still have a fairly free level of press. You get to see how COVID has been ravaging Hong Kong. Hong Kong is a part of China after all, and if you look at the numbers there, you can imagine just how bad it is across the border in places like Shenzhen. I want to cast all speculation aside though. Let's say for instance that the zero COVID policy has worked to a certain point. Now it's reached its breaking point. People are tired of being locked down all the time and on a whim. Even people that staunchly support the Chinese Communist Party are complaining about it. They're tweeting about having to carry 2 weeks worth of supplies with them everywhere they go, just in case they get stuck in their office, get stuck in a coffee shop, get stuck in a convention center. The people that were cheering on the necessity of welding people in their houses in the first place are finally getting to the point where they're not very happy with the fact that their freedoms can be taken away at any moment. Chinese state media even released a rather badly timed documentary on how well China handled the pandemic and how well the zero COVID policy worked compared to how the rest of the world languished and suffered. You know, it's this absolutely crazy idea that it's an us versus them situation rather than a we are the world fighting this one big pandemic together that has caused so much division, so much hate, so many unnecessary deaths. It's the idea that China was trying to hide the fact that this pandemic leaked from China in the first place, trying to blame other countries, trying to cover up where it came from and how quickly it spread. In fact, it was all this cover-up nonsense that allowed it to spread internationally in the first place, silencing doctor whistleblowers, preventing domestic flights in and out of Wuhan, but allowing them to go internationally when they knew that human-to-human transmission was already happening. These kind of things led to the spread of the pandemic. Then the whole, our system is better than your system. Your vaccine is not good for Chinese bodies, or our vaccine is better for Chinese people. And look, people actually believe that. I know a lot of doctors, because I used to train them in Shenzhen, and even they were saying that the Chinese vaccine is better for Chinese bodies, because Chinese bodies are not like Western bodies. They need something different. I mean, this absurdity. I've even been contacted by some of the very hardline foreigners that still live in China right now, the people that completely hate my guts and are against the message I'm trying to spread, because they support China and the Communist Party so much. Even they have contacted me to say enough is enough, and they're leaving. They're either leaving China, or they secretly have got to the point where they cannot agree with the policies of the CCP anymore. And you know why? It's because it's finally hit them. The privileged few that live in the big cities, that put out these blogs and vlogs about how amazing China is and the high-speed rails and things like that, they've managed to, for the most part, avoid these severe lockdowns. Sure, they've been limited in their travel. Sure, they've been limited in, where they can go and what they can do. But now, being locked in your own house for an extended period of time where you are forced to undergo constant testing and their freedoms being taken away like that, it's finally dawned on them that China is a country where your freedom can be taken away from you in just a split second if the government decides. This is something that the average Chinese person that doesn't live an elite life in the big cities has known about since the beginning of the pandemic. The zero COVID policy is an attack on personal freedom. If you want to completely isolate yourself, lock yourself in your house, not allow yourself to leave, you can do so if you so choose. Not in China, you can't. You can do so when the government tells you so, and you may not go against what they say. Living here in the United States during the pandemic has taught me a lot. It's taught me a lot about freedom and the responsibility that comes with freedom. I've seen everything from anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, stupid people getting together on purpose in spite of this pandemic. In fact, they do it on purpose to show how much they don't care. I've seen people that have been overly cautious. I've seen both sides. And then I see the moderates in the middle. The people who realize that when you've got an infectious pandemic, which is not very well known going around, that it's good to stay away from indoor spaces. It's good to social distance. It's good to wear a mask, just in case. I've seen all sides of the spectrum. But you know what I haven't seen in the USA is I haven't seen people being welded into their apartments. I have not seen people being forcefully tested, forcefully shut into their housing complexes. I've seen periods where restaurants were not allowed to have dine-in customers. I've seen businesses go out of business because of this terrible pandemic. I've seen all sorts of terrible things too. But one thing I have not seen is people's freedoms being taken away. Case in point, this is my daughter at the beach in the height of the pandemic. I was able to go places and do things, and never once did I feel as if my freedoms and my movement was terribly restricted. I just knew that there was a heavy responsibility for myself and the safety of my family to adhere to certain guidelines and good practice. It's simple. Common sense wins out. And the responsibility of freedom is that you get to choose eventually which consequences you're willing to live with. My heart goes out to everybody who's in lockdown in China. Everybody who's had their freedoms taken away because of a ridiculous policy put on by the government. This pandemic isn't going away anytime soon. And as the rest of the world returns more or less back to normal and starts living with the idea that COVID is going to be around to stay, China still clings to its zero COVID policy. This is truly a breaking point for China, because people will only allow their freedoms to be taken away so much until they reach breaking point. Remember, everybody, we're in this together. Whether you think COVID leaked from a Wuhan lab, or if you think it's a CIA hoax brought about to create the Great Reset or something like that I keep hearing about, whatever you think COVID is, whether you believe in it or not, it doesn't matter. We all have a shared responsibility here, and that is to look after each other as human beings. So be good to each other, and stay awesome.
我是一名莲湖区桃园街道办大总部社区西边枫灯小区志愿者。站在镜头前的这名男子，翻越咱们的防护，逃避咱们的隔离，目的动机不详。下面经过我们的劝导、教育，这名青年已经认识到自己的错误。
我深切意识到了自己的做法是多么的可笑，一旦出现问题，我就会造成无法挽回的后果。向小区、社区所有工作人员说一声对不起。我前几次翻出的原因是因为，包括这一次原因是因为我家里没有什么吃的了，我要去超市买一些东西吃。但是因为而且在网上买菜就是老抢不到嘛。
首先，在咱们政府的爱心呵护下，昨天给大家2000多户，每家每户都发了蔬菜，你收到了吗？那为什么你刚才还念了这，还是因为没有吃的，没有蔬菜翻越？咱暂且不说，疫情当下，防护安全人人有责。你今天翻越了我们小区隔离护区，就是在抗拒疫情。国家不会同意，政府不会同意，我们工作者更不会同意。这一次也是在镜头给你一个警告，如果再有一次，我会把你依法交到公安机关处理。